Hello, hi, welcome to another episode of Cinderella Stories with Ash and Sav. My name is Ashley, and we move. I thought we were going to move on from the Olympics, but it turns out we move into dissecting behavior of the men's team. But before you hit the buzzer, understanding its impacts on the women. So I think by now we've all seen that video of a FaceTime call with FBI Director Kash Patel holding out the phone as the men's national team, after their gold medal winning performance against Canada in overtime, spoke with Donald Trump. Now, everybody is up in arms because they all laughed when he said, and just so you know, we're going to have to invite the girls. I'll be impeached if I don't invite the women. And everyone laughed and chuckled and ha 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 ha, very mob mentality energy. But here's my stance on it. Why are we surprised? That's the thing. I was just reminded of my disillusionment. And so now I'm back down to earth. There was a moment where I was watching this men's hockey game with all my friends at Real Sports Bar, and it was prime sports content. There was tension. There were arch nemesis, rivals. There was the expectation that Team Canada was better, and the US with their attitude being like, we don't care. We're coming in to take the title off you. It's the first time best on best NHL hockey has been at the Olympics. And I was enamored. I was back on the edge of my seat. I was feeling everything from Canada's loss to Nathan McKinnon looking at that stuffed Tina doll with disdain, to Team USA holding up the Johnny Gaudreau jersey and bringing his kids on the ice for the photo. I was back in. And then in that moment, when I saw Kash Patel, who's been doing everything but his job in terms of giving us information on the Epstein files, which very clearly include the president, I was reminded that these hockey players are exactly who we think they are, for the most part. There's also something that I go back to often when I get frustrated with men's sports, and it's Brock McGillis talking to us about his experience in these hockey locker rooms. And he said, I actually think that hockey players are the most accepting of any sport in terms of homosexuality, in terms of diversity, in terms of the way that they feel personally about women, misogyny, all this stuff. However, he says the culture of hockey does not allow for them to express their true views. And that's where we see this toxicity, and that's where we see this mob mentality. And once again, that's what was displayed in that phone call, those half-hearted Hilary Knight has done more for hockey than you have combined as a group. And you guys are laughing at the fact that they're getting invited as an afterthought, or that, oh, they have to be there because if I don't show love to the girls, I'm going to get impeached. Like, what are you guys doing? Why are you laughing just for the sake of laughing? Like, it's not even funny. And again, it reminded me exactly why I don't with men's sports. And I feel like that's what we were seeing in that moment. Shout out to the two players who said, absolutely, the women should be there. Shout out to the guy in the back who yelled 2 for 2 and was very supportive. But it was the laughter, it was the bad jokes, it was the old boys country club feel of it all that just reminded me that, yeah, we have a long way to go. And quite frankly, I won't be along for the ride. I'm not going to waste my time or energy trying to find a lane that works for me in a sport that, quite frankly, isn't prepared to take that next step. So individually and independently, there might be individuals who don't feel that way, but the overarching theme always feels toxic. It always feels closed off. And this was just a stark reminder of that. And I think that's why it's so disappointing, because we just had this epic run of heated rivalry and inclusion and what if, and, you know, it's this fantasy and it's this aspirational feel, but it's not the reality. A creator named Ashley Hufford put it brilliantly on her Instagram page. I highly recommend that you go check out her sentiments on it. But it was just like, why are you laughing when the girls are invited? Well, the US women's team announced that they're not going to because of scheduling conflicts. And do I wish that that statement was a little bit more? Yes. But I also understand not wanting to get engaged and get wrapped up in it and face probably a comment or backlash from Donald Trump, the president, talking some kind of craziness about them not coming. So I feel like I get why they're just like, we have previous commitment, sorry, can't make it. The path of least resistance sometimes is best with people that can't hear you. So that was really, really disappointing. And you are the company you keep. I've said it before, and it remains true today. Okay. So that's all I'm going to say about that. It's just, it feels like death by a thousand cuts. You know, when we're living in a time where people's lives really are at stake, it's not the end of the world that these men spoke with Donald Trump on a FaceTime call, but it's just another reminder, another paper cut on the skin that stings and burns. And that's exactly what that felt like, a punch in the face to people that want to be involved in hockey, but have to draw the line somewhere. And that's what these hockey players are privileged in the sense of, is that they don't need to pick a side, even though they clearly are. Okay. With that being said, let's move on to another Olympic update, but this time of the inspiring genre? No, that's not what I want to say. Let's move on to an Olympic update that is jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring. I don't understand it at all, because Lindsey Vonn, she provided an update today. And girl, we thought it was bad. It's worse than I could have ever imagined. So we know Lindsey Vonn tore her ACL prior to Olympic competition. We know she went down in her event and she broke her leg. We've seen images of it filled with screws, but she broke down play by play exactly what was happening. And you guys, Lindsey Vonn almost had to get an amputation. I don't think you an amputation. She almost had to get her leg cut off because of the extent of her injuries on the Cortina Mountains, right? So here's the laundry list of things that were wrong. Complex tibia fracture, fractured fibia head, and tibia plateau. She had compartment syndrome, which if you've ever seen a season of Grey's Anatomy, you know how brutal it is. Essentially, blood pools in a compartment of your leg, and as a result, it crushes everything that's there, muscles, nerves, and it can cost you your leg. What they have to do is essentially slice down the compartments of your leg and give it space to breathe. The blood runs out, the swelling is able to actually go somewhere. It's brutal, it's gruesome. So she had that as well. And again, it impacts nerves, tendons, and muscles. So the word she used is that the doctor had to fillet her leg to release the pressure. So think about that. You're cutting a chicken breast and you fillet it, you're filleting salmon. That's what was done to her leg. A 6-hour surgery to basically rebuild her leg from scratch. The girl was literally on her deathbed. She needed a blood transfusion. Oh yeah, she also broke her right ankle. Also that. So from top to bottom, it's just like, she's going to have to learn how to walk again, essentially. She's going to be on crutches for at least 2 months, that she said. She's pretty immobile right now. Obviously, she needs to let her body recover. But the way this woman was so raw and real about the actual injury is like, damn. I'm hopeful she'll be able to recover from this fully. And if anyone can, Lindsey Vonn can. And I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. As I said, I've been a supporter of her mindset and I've been supporter of her compete level since day one. But the magnitude of this, girl, please stay off the mountain. Please stay off the mountain. I want to see you in Aspen on like a blue square level hill. I don't want to see you anywhere near a black diamond. I want to see you at Prey Ski. I want to see you on a bunny hill. I want to see you tubing, please. And I know that that's not going to happen. That's just not the way that she is. Like, I feel like she is going to make her triumphant return to the hill, maybe not in competition, but again, Lindsey Vonn almost had her leg amputated. That was the severity of her crash. And I personally didn't think it was that bad. I knew it was bad. I assumed that there was some kind of fracture that had maybe pierced the skin. And I say that as if it's so casual. But hearing the degree of injury that she dealt with and the fact that they nearly had to cut off her leg, whew, for the love of the game, that brings it to a whole new level. So, Lindsey Vonn, a speedy recovery, my dear, but please, please take care of yourself. Please, I beg, I beg, I beg. Um, the Olympics. Yeah, they'll do it to you every time. The highs and the lows were on full display. So shout out to the USA women for winning gold. Shout out to the Canadian teams for their overtime performances, even though they came up short, and silver for the men and the women's. We're proud of you, and we love to see it. Okay. Sundays are for the girls, and people are pissed. They're so mad. They're so mad. And what I'm referring to is the fact that ESPN is set to replace Sunday Night Baseball with women's sports Sundays. So over the summer, it's going to be 9 weeks, 12 games, and they're going to feature WNBA and NWSL matchups. And this is some very, very exciting stuff. Because what do you mean you're taking away a men's product in order to prop up and pour into women? And this is a pillar of ESPN coverage, by the way. For those who don't know, they've been having Sunday Night Baseball for nearly 4 decades. 36 years it's been Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN. And now they're doing women's sports Sundays. Sundays are for the girls officially. And I can't even fathom this, because not too long ago, I would say 3 to 5 years ago, you could barely find a women's sporting event that you wanted to watch. You're looking at box scores, you're hoping for a write-up from a student who's volunteering and trying to get their reps in. Maybe on a major scale, March Madness, the quarterfinals, the Sweet 16 onwards, you hear about women, but primarily it's men's coverage. So this is something that is inspiring. This is something that's going to change the game for an entire generation, because it's an entire day of programming. It's not just the games, it's also digital coverage, studio coverage, features. It's amazing. I know, that's right. I'm excited to see it. My 15-year-old heart is just beaming. But here's how this is actually playing out, and here's how this is going to go down. Because while it's great that Women's Sports Sunday is happening, it's not as though they're doing it necessarily on purpose. And here's what I mean by that. So again, for 4 decades, ESPN programming has featured Major League Baseball, but this is happening because there's a conclusion of a long-running partnership between ESPN and Major League Baseball. In February of last year, the two sides mutually agreed to end their 7-year, $550 million per year television deal after just 4 seasons. Now, they did renegotiate in a deal that allows ESPN to air 30 nationally televised midweek games, and now Sunday baseball lives on NBC. So filling that gap is required, and ESPN could have used anybody or anything at their disposal that they had the rights of. And you know what? They chose the girls. So hell yeah. Even though it was a business decision to part ways with Major League Baseball, and that $550 million is probably being reallocated somewhere else, it doesn't mean that they had to put women's sports in the forefront, but they chose to anyway, because they understood the value of having the women's game showcased. And so they leaned in. You know what I'm saying? AKA focusing on women's sports was a good business decision. It's good for business, which is something that nobody, no detractors, no haters, no skeptics can take away. If ESPN, these sports leaders, understanding that women's sports Sundays are going to pay off for them, that's something that we need to pay attention to in terms of market trends. Now, as I mentioned, the franchise, Women's Sports Sundays, is about more than showcasing the games. They want to build a consistent, high-profile destination that reflects passion, excellence, and cultural impact of women's sports today. That's coming from Rosalind Durant of ESPN, Executive Vice President of Programming and Acquisitions. So a few things. Obviously, it's exceptional. It's a small sample size, 9 weeks, okay? But that's 2 months in the summer that we wouldn't have otherwise have. It's still a big deal. That's not undermining it. And I will say it's not like the girls are going to have to go up against the NFL on Sundays. If that was the case, this move likely would not have been made. It probably wouldn't have gone over as well. But the reality is that the demographics are so separate. And ESPN is saying, okay, the baseball demographic, despite the fact that baseball viewership has been rising year over year for the last 4 years, last year's numbers were the best that they've seen since 2022. But what they're saying is that we believe in the women's sports demographic enough to know that we're okay to pivot. And even if our viewing losses are incremental, they are still substantial. Okay. So the viewership bump for MLB has bumped up for the past 4 years, as I mentioned. So here's the actual number. Fox, ESPN, and TBS are enjoying audience growth. Fox Sports Baseball Night in America package is averaging a league high 2.14 million viewers per window, which is up from 4% from a year ago. In comparison, ESPN and ABC saw a 6% ratings increase for WNBA games last year with an average of 1.3 million viewers. So while you can numbers comp to death, the reality is that these two products couldn't be more different. Major League Baseball and WNBA basketball could not be more different. So while it's not ESPN punting on baseball because they still get those midweek games and they're going to draw viewers that way, they are saying that, listen, if we build it, they will come. And that's the attitude towards women's sports, which we're seeing, which is everything in women's sports is growing at a gargantuan pace. And so they're banking on the fact that this growth is still in its infancy. And the timing could not be more excellent because of the CBA drama. And the reason that I say this is because everyone is worried that the CBA is going to cause people not to be interested. But I've kind of changed my tune on this. While the negotiations and the lack of movement, I stand by it, are boring. Like, we want to see action, ACT. You know what I mean? We want to see actual movement. Think about the feeling that you have when something that you care about might be taken away from you. You know what I mean? Like, there's a guy you don't like, but you see him maybe moving on and leaving your roster, and you're like, wait, hold on, let me pull you back in. Is that toxic? I'll work on it. Nonetheless, I think that once this CBA situation is rectified, even though the women have the ability to strike, it was voted on in December, I think that it's going to be a relief that something that fans love so much is not gone by the wayside. A year is not being squandered, that they're going to be even more dedicated to the cause. Think about it. Think about a man who cheats on his wife. He's never been more dedicated to his family because he saw in his mind, in the crystal ball, losing his wife and kids. So now he's back, dedicated as ever. Everything he said he was going to do, he did. And I think that that's the impact that we're going to see with the CBA. So with that being said, here are some CBA updates. Now, it's a sleeper build in terms of the plot here, okay? There haven't been a ton of concessions. When the WNBA PA went to the league, they said, we want X amount of money for the salary cap, X amount of money for minimum salaries. We want better 401k investment. We want more mental health checks and balances. And the revenue sharing, obviously, is the big component. And so part of the league's response 6 weeks later, was that, okay, well, if you want all those things, you're going to need to give up something. And the W tried to take away from the players their housing. Okay, that was something that the league and the teams were doing for their players. They were putting them up in houses. All the players, so here's where the league stands now. All the players will be guaranteed housing in 2026. For 2027 and 28, only players on minimum salaries or those who have no years of service would be provided housing. After 2028, the housing benefit will expire for the full-time 12-year player roster, and it will be your own personal problem. Now, keeping in mind that the Supermax salary was just under $250,000 last year, and the maximum salary this year could reach up to $1 million, I do think it's fair for players who are making the higher end of the salary to scale down the league's funding of their lifestyle even though, listen, it was like one bedroom condos, it wasn't anything crazy. And they're going to be set up in order to withstand unforeseen circumstances and inconveniences like trades that can happen with different aspects of professional life. So once the salaries are boosted, and that's even the minimum salaries, I think it is fair to grandfather in players taking care of their own accommodations. However, I can see this being a sticking point of the WNBA PA wanting to take care of their babies, wanting to take care of their rookies, and trying to find some common ground, like teams take care of housing in the first year of rookie deals for all players, just to make sure that they have one less thing to worry about. And if that was a pain point for players as they entered the league, it's very clear that this current regime in the PA is trying to make sure that future generations don't experience the difficulties that they did as well. And if housing is one of them, which clearly it has been a topic, that this is something that they are going to want to make sure that first year rookies get to keep in the league. But that is something that the league came back with and said, all right, fine, 2026, you got it. 27, 28, the rookies and the babies can get it. After 28, you're on your own. So the bigger issue, as we know, is revenue sharing. The players submitted to the league 2 weeks ago asking for now 27.5 gross revenue, down from 30%. The league is standing 10 toes down. They're saying, listen, it's 70% of net revenue, which equates to less than 15% of gross, or it's literally nothing. This is clearly going to be the sticking point. While the players went down 2.5%, the league didn't move at all. At all. So that's something to keep in mind. Oh, and additionally, the players are wanting a salary cap close to 10 million, 9.5, and the league is saying we'll give you closer to 6. Yeah. It's tough. And the war of words has continued to escalate in the media, I would say, because prior to countering the PA's latest offer, this is what the W said. The Players Association's latest proposal remained unrealistic and would cause hundreds of millions of dollars of losses to our teams. That was from a WNBA spokesperson reported by ESPN. We still need to complete 2 drafts, free agency, before the start of training camp. And we are running out of time. Rushing, creating catastrophic narratives. We believe the WNBA's proposal would result in a huge win for current players and generations to come. Okay. So as a counter to that, Terry Jackson, who's with the PA, refuted the league's sentiment regarding the union's latest proposal. It is unfathomable that anyone would question our commitment to negotiations and desire to get a deal done after nearly a year and a half of pulling and pushing and meetings and proposals and counter offers, Jackson said. We have been kept waiting 6 weeks for a response from the league. What we have proposed is very realistic. What the league and teams have done is played games. So this is the back and forth that we're having. Both teams are trying to mark their territory, get their narrative out. And the one thing that I think is important is this viewpoint that the league is losing money. And so there's 2 things to that. Toronto and Portland paid $50 million in expansion fees to get into the W. But Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia, all owned and operated by the WNBA team or the NBA team in those markets, they're coming in at a cost of $250 million each. So that nearly $1 billion since 2023 when the Valkyries joined the league as the 13th team. Where's that money at? Where does the money reside? Because how can you tell us that, quote unquote, the Players Association's latest proposal remains unrealistic and would cause hundreds of millions of dollars in losses when the biggest TV deal and the rights deal is coming down the pipeline, and $1 billion in expansion fees have been garnered in the last 2+ years? Right. That's what I thought. So there isn't any indication of where those funds go, aside from the assumption that it's back to the stakeholders, because we reported on Cinderella Stories before, but the expansion fees are not included in league revenue numbers as of this point. And additionally, I just came across this today on social, which I do think is very important. The WNBA made, so this is reported by Just Women's Sports, the WNBA made enough money in 2025 to trigger revenue sharing for the first time ever. And this is via Katie Barnes, ESPN. So what hundreds of millions of dollars? Because we're up. We're up in terms of teams, membership, expansion fees, viewership, merch sales, ticket sales. We're up. So what hundreds of millions of dollars are going to be lost? Girl, what are you talking about? And until there's transparency financially, how are we supposed to believe you? Because why would we believe big business over the Players Association when we know exactly what businesses do to try and save money? So again, anyone who does their taxes in a way that there are write-offs, they know that there are mechanisms in place that allow you to claim less money. And these are legal mechanisms, whether that's an LLC that you put all your revenue into, and then you take out a salary so you don't pay taxes on what's sitting in the bank, right? Or, owners, as an example, reported by Front Office Sports, who were talking to a CPA, it suggests that owners could pay themselves a bonus that absorbs all the profits, and therefore on the books, it has implications that there are no profits to revenue share. Right. So with that in mind, understanding that the point of investing is to make money, and all these people who invested in women's sports shout out to being an ally, it doesn't actually mean that you're not trying to recoup your money. So I just think it's funny because the players received their portion of shared revenue if an undisclosed revenue target for the season negotiated in the previous CBA is hit. The players' portion is an additional $16 million, with $8 million being dispersed among 13 teams and $8 million going to off-season initiatives. So if for the first time ever you hit revenue sharing numbers, how are you losing hundreds of millions of dollars when there's never been more money coming in? I just think it's funny. So that's the latest development in the CBA. And it's just very important to understand that both sides are going to be using words and language and storytelling that obviously benefits them. But it is important to remember that, well, first of all, I'm on the side of the players forever and always. And that these large businesses, the NBA, the investors group, and the league are prioritizing their money and their finances and recouping the cost that they feel like they've lost over the past 20 years of the WNBA. And they're saying this looks crazy. And they're saying basically that they're going to pay themselves first for all the work and advocacy that they put in, as opposed to the players, who are the ones who bring in the fans, who are the ones who generated the interest, who are the ones that put their bodies on the line. Right. So that's the CBA update, is that the league has now countered, but there hasn't been much movement. And the only thing that's been made concessions and made movement is the housing, not the revenue share, which is the pivotal component of these negotiations both ways. Okay. So I know I said that this was not going to be an Olympic episode, but we got to bring in Savannah Hamilton one last time live from Cortina, because she has been doing the Lord's work in her first ever Olympics. And she has given us a Cinderella Stories exclusive, her biggest takeaways, everything she saw, everything she felt, everything that we need to know. Here's Savannah Hamilton from the Olympics one last time.
My love for storytelling in sports came back. And the crazy part is I didn't even know it went missing in the first place. And sometimes you just get so caught up in the craft because it's literally your job to perform. You got to focus on the delivery, the details, the execution, everything goes into it because you're so used to doing it for everybody else. I won't even get into the sacrifices. And somewhere along the way, sometimes you forget why you even started. You forget your why. And this experience, just simply put, reminded me of my why. 16 years old in the car with my dad when I first told him I wanted to be a sports journalist. It was for experiences and moments like this. Seeing the Canadian flag lifted when Canada won gold, I've never been so proud to be Canadian. And you best believe I sang every word of that national anthem. There's just something about the purity of sport, getting to talk to literally ordinary people with extraordinary talent that stay so humble. This opportunity allowed me to tell stories that matter. Why sports matters, why investment into people matters, why belief in your country matters. And I could confidently say that, I could confidently say that I made the little girl in me very proud. And I had a lot of fun doing it.
Just because the Olympics are done, we're not just going to stop cheering for our fellow countrymen and women, right? Right. And listen, I've been guilty of it as well. Absolutely. I think it's very apparent that there is less interest on a broad scope in the Paralympics than the Olympics, but this is the year we're going to change that, because here are the details that you really need to know. And if you don't, there's no shame, but we're going to be in the front row now, watching and cheering. The information is available, so now it's up to us to show up. So here are the key details. The Paralympics are in Milano Cortina, the same city that is hosting the Olympics, hosts the Paralympics every single year, but a week later. So this year, March 6th to 15th, that is when the Paralympics are being held. Now, it's a short event because in the Winter Games, there are significantly less events that are played than in the Summer Games. So I also want to point out that the Paralympics are different than the Special Olympics. And just from talking to some people over the last couple of weeks, there seems to be some confusion in that regard. The Paralympic Games, according to their website, are considered elite international multi-sport events for athletes with physical, visual, and intellectual impairments. Again, they're held every 4 years immediately following the Olympics. The Summer Games are more robust, if you will. There's 22 sports that are played and participated in, while the Winter Games feature 5. Okay. This was really cool. I didn't know this, so please bear with me as I give story time, because I think it's just so cool. The Paralympics movement started with a man named Dr. Ludwig Gutmann. He organized the competitions earlier for World War II veterans in 1948. It evolved from the first demonstration, which was an archery competition, into the first Paralympic Games in Rome in 1960. So obviously, after World War II, there were a significant amount of veterans as well as civilians who had been injured. And at the request of the British government, Dr. Gutmann opened up a spinal injuries center called Stoke Mandeville Hospital. It was in Britain, and it was supposed to be a rehabilitation center. Now, at the time, anybody who was suffering from a spinal cord injury in that magnitude, where they were bedridden, they were given 2 years to live, and they were kind of written off. They were ostracized from society, and there really wasn't a physiotherapy protocol that was in place or a way to get them reintegrated into society, hence the low life expectancy. But Dr. Gutmann came in and he said, no. We are going to get you back moving. Rehabilitation is going to be sport involved. And it's not necessarily even going to be recreational. We are going to compete, because this is something that not only gives you confidence, it kind of takes the stigma away from being a paraplegic in these instances and gives you something to be proud of. And when you accomplish something, it builds your self-worth. And that was his long-term goal. And it was something that really at the time was radical. So in 1948, the Stoke Mandeville Games were held. It's the first iteration of the Paralympics. They involved 16 injured servicemen and women, 14 men, 2 women, and they took part in archery. And again, the idea was fitness, boosting self-esteem, and returning dignity, because people who suffered spinal cord injuries, they literally just were cast aside. But Dr. Gutmann said, no, Not on my watch. And then in 1952, the first international event was held. A small team from the Netherlands came to the United States to compete. And then, as I mentioned, 1960 in Rome is when it first was off US soil. Following the Paris Games, things escalated in a positive way. 400 men and women representing, I've seen different research. So 23 or 24 countries participated in 8 sports, and the rest is history. And that's where we are now. And the way that the Winter Games are set up today is that athletes will compete across 79 medal events across the 6 sports. The sports are alpine skiing, para-alpine skiing, para-biathlon, para-cross-country skiing, para-ice hockey, para-snowboarding, and wheelchair curling. So I didn't realize, honestly, that the Paralympians competed in snowboard, which I just think is so cool. Also snowboard cross, which is you're racing against each other at the same time on a track. And one of the biggest advocates for making snowboard a Paralympic event was a world champion named Bibiane Mentelspay. Okay, so Mentelspay won 3 para golds, her last in 2018 at 45 years old. She was exceptional in everything that she did. Now, she did pass away in 2021 from a brain tumor. She battled cancer 9 times throughout her life, but she was just inspirational. And here's a little bit of her story. And I think that it's reflective of the challenges that Paralympians face, but also highlights the fact that these are athletes. And I read an article while I was researching for this episode. And one of the things is that, yes, it's great for the Paralympians to be known for everything that they've overcome, but they also want to be known for their competition. They want to be asked about their tactics, their strategy, everything that you would ask an Olympian. The Paralympians focus on their events just as much. And so I think it's important to recognize and realize that. So getting back to our girl Mentelspay, she was a 6-time Dutch champion on the FIS Snowboard World Cup. She did half pipe and she did snowboard cross disciplines. That's when medical troubles hit. So she found a bone tumor in her leg and it was removed, but it came back. And the risk was that the infection would spread to her blood and it would be really tough to come back from. So instead of that, she got her leg amputated. Then she went on to win another Dutch snowboarding championship, not a para event, you guys. She won the Dutch snowboarding championship. Then is when the work started. So as an amputee in 2012, she helped the IPC. So instead of the IOC, it's the International Paralympic Committee. She helped them and was a founding mother, if you will, to adapt snowboarding for the Paralympics. All that to say, I will be sat for the Paralympics, and I'm not judging, but I'm not judging. Right? We have the facilities to be able to watch and keep up with the Paralympics. And these are athletes that are representing your country, same as the way the Olympians are representing your country. So tune in, get curious, ask questions, and let's enjoy this event because it is absolutely worth our time. Okay? We will be following it on Cinderella Stories for you as well to keep you updated on anything that you may have missed. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ashley. This is Cinderella Stories with Ash and Sav. Savannah will hopefully be back next week, but we will be following everything that you need to know in women's sports. So make sure that you like, subscribe. Let us know what you want to hear about if we haven't been talking about it enough. But it's been great to chat with you, and I can't wait to see you next week. Bye.